I have maintained for a very long time that hate speech laws have nothing to do with hate speech. Hate speech, of course, does not exist. It is simply speech that others don't like, but rather to do with the eventual goal of criminalizing Christianity. And Canada has just proven that to the whole world. This is from GB News. It says Canada to criminalize biblical passages with new hate speech law. Current rules state that anyone expressing views based on belief in a religious text can avoid prosecution for hate speech, but they're about to obliterate that. Canadian MPs have voted to scrap a long-standing religious exemption from the country's hate speech laws following a deal struck between the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois. The Fiery Commons Committee meeting on Tuesday saw Liberal MPs back an amendment to Bill C-9, known as the Combating Hate Act, that would remove protections for those quoting religious texts. Under the current rules, anyone expressing views in good faith and based on belief in a religious text can avoid prosecution for hate speech. The Bloc has pushed for years to close what it sees as a loophole that allows homophobia, anti-Semitism, and racial abuse to hide behind religious justification. Bloc Justice critic Rial Fortin argued if Bill C-9 is to truly fight hate crime, we have to remove this religious exemption. The fallout began after radical Imam Adil Charkawi called for all, quote, Zionist aggressors to be killed. Mr. Charkawi claimed his remarks were a prayer and therefore could not, under the existing law, be classed as hate speech. The Quebec Prosecutor's Office concluded in May of last year that no criminal offence had been committed. So there's your problem right there. You can't just call for people to be killed and then claim it's prayer. But say that is something that is part of the Imam's religion, which he's claiming it is, and clearly the Quebec Prosecutor's Office agrees is part of his religion, considering they concluded no crime had been committed. Has there been a discussion in Canada about whether Islam is compatible with their society? If it is part of a religion to call for people to be killed, then that religion and its place in society should be examined. Why would calls for violence inside that religion constitute criminalization of the religion of Christianity and biblical verses, especially something like the New Testament, which calls for loving your enemy and praying for them rather than responding with the Old Testament law of an eye for an eye? It goes on that the proposed amendment has sparked fierce opposition from religious communities and Conservative MPs alike. Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, posted on X the change would criminalise sections of the Bible, Quran, Torah, and other sacred texts. So this is how they're getting away with it. Oh, look, we're just going to punish everyone equally. Never mind that we have not addressed this clear problem, that there is a religion that, according to our own determination, is calling for violence, whereas the other, being Christianity, does not. We're just going to punish everyone equally, ban religion, because we're refusing to deal with this particular problem. And that, many would argue, is by design in itself. It goes on. Meanwhile, his colleague Andrew Lawton described it as a full-scale assault on religious freedom. The Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops wrote to Prime Minister Mark Carney expressing significant concerns, arguing the exemption has served as an essential safeguard protecting Canadians from prosecution for sincere religious expression. Hasib Hassan from the National Council of Canadian Muslims said, I think all Canadians can recognise that this is an issue that affects all of them, including religious and non-religious Canadians. Justice Minister Sean Fraser has firmly rejected claims that the amendment threatens religious freedom. Speaking at a press conference on Tuesday, he insisted it would in no way, shape or form prevent a religious leader from reading their religious texts. It will not criminalise faith. Okay, then why are you putting it in? Why are you putting the law in? If your goal is not to criminalize people for the previous protection that was in there for sincere expressions of faith, then why would you bring the law in the first place? Mr. Fraser went further, saying that suggesting otherwise was a perversion of the values that the major religions in this country and around the world stand for. So even to suggest that this could be something that limits freedom of religious expression is a perversion of values. Well, I would say that perhaps the law is a perversion of those faiths. But us saying that is a perversion of Western values. This is so inverted and crazy. He also noted the government isn't aware of any case where the exemption has actually been used to acquit someone charged with hate speech, suggesting it may be redundant anyway. Okay, so that brings us to the point again. Why bring the law? Why waste taxpayer money and resources to even debate this? Form a bloc, all agree that this law is required if it's going to be redundant anyway. And it goes on, beyond the religious exemption row, Bill C-9 contains several other measures designed to tackle hate crime. It would make obstructing access to places of worship punishable by up to 10 years in prison, covering everything from blocking doors to roads outside synagogues, mosques, and other gathering places. The legislation also targets the public display of terror and hate symbols, including those linked to Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Islamic State. So we then get into the discussion of freedom of religion. You are free to practice your religion, of course, but if your religion has practices that go against the laws of the land, which are rooted in Christianity, by the way, then we need to examine your religion. For example, you can believe that Satanism is freedom of religion, but if your particular sect of Satanism calls for animal or human sacrifice in the woods at 3 a.m., you are going to prison. Why? Because the laws of the land in the Western world are based in Christianity, which say that animal or human sacrifice is not allowed. The laws of the land in the West have always been based in Christianity, slowly aren't anymore. But those are laws which have been rooted in a morality that has led to the most thriving societies in history before they started to erode them. If people are coming in with different morals and values, the solution is not to criminalize verses out of the book that brought us thriving societies before a mishmash of morals and values were imported in. And in fact, the reason the West is in the shape that it is in today is because we continue to erode Christianity. Why would we do that even more now in response to this? The bottom line is this. This is an attack on Christianity specifically. It's covered by a loose statement of, oh, we're criminalizing some of the Quran or Torah too, but the goal truly is here a one world religion, one where they get to decide which parts of older religions they want to keep and which they want to destroy. And inside that one world religion is their plan to eliminate Christ, but that's a battle that they will never win.